Hi, folks. We're going to take a look at lecture number 7, the critical period. Okay, you'll notice it's the period of time where essentially we're going to look at our brand new nation here as right after the Revolutionary War and the success of that, despite the fact that they actually did a lot of planning for it even before they knew the war was over. Why is it called the critical period? Because it is critical for them to establish some type of sense of government and plan in place for when the success of the country comes into play after the war. One of the biggest things we need to take a look at is even before the war is over, you got to understand that the states, or excuse me, the colonies began to organize themselves in their new constitutions, so that the fact that they were their own 13 independent governments, okay? When you take a look at a lot of these state constitutions, okay, which again established even before the war was over, okay? So they started actually this organization ahead of time. If you take a look at it, pretty much the majority of them had some form of Bill of Rights, the protection of those. Each of them had, so you're looking at John Locke, okay, separation of powers, 3 branches, always the best, as said by Montesquieu. Okay, a lot of them had opened up and kind of widened their voting requirements, which was generally white males who owned, and all you had to do was own a little bit of property there. And then if you wanted to be an office-holding politician, generally speaking, those had a higher property qualification to them. Now, our first document that's going to be passed by the Continental Congress in getting ready for the country to have at least some kind of constitution in place with banking on the fact that we will succeed in the American Revolution was known as the Articles of Confederation, okay? Now, this was purposely written to be a weak document, meaning lacking of power. Now, why is that? Well, they're fighting a tyrant. They're fighting this type of monarchy. They don't want to establish this strong tyrannical power of a government in place of one that they just fought against, okay? So this will be adopted by Congress in 1777, and the war is just beginning, but they want to have a plan in place, and obviously banking on the fact that they will win. We're talking about a one-branch government, okay? Just one branch, Congress. That's it. No executive, no judicial, okay? Bit of a weakness? I think so. Each state is only given one vote, not based on population or anything else, just one vote per state, okay? Fair, to the small states, not so fair to the large states. It took 9 out of 13 states to vote in for new laws, and it took a unanimous vote for amendments, actually changes. This is near impossible. So potential weakness? Absolutely. Now, the powers it did have, it could wage war, but we're not going to do that again. We're just getting out of one. Yes, they have the process of, or have the power to actually make treaties, which is good, and that will be a success in actually ending the war with England. They do have the power to ask states to borrow money, and this is a bit of a success because they at least got some funds to help the Revolutionary War throughout the course. But as we'll see when the war ends, this will not be a huge benefit. Major weaknesses: could not regulate currencies. We got 13 currencies flying around out there. Horrible for exchange rates. No power to tax is probably the biggest weakness of all. They got war debts, they got other debts incurred, and they don't have the power. They can ask states to pay over for tax money, but the states don't have to. So definitely a major weakness in that sense. And no executive branch or judicial branch to both enforce the laws and even assess the laws. Okay? Now, what are some of the accomplishments under the Articles? Well, we know that we kept things going in the war and also negotiated peace terms with Britain. Those are huge successes and accomplishments. You got to give them props for that. But probably the 2 biggest props we need to give the Articles as a document would be both dealing with land. All this brand new land that we got out of, the Revolutionary War against England, well, what are we going to do with it? Well, the biggest thing is to encourage families to move out there, and the sale of that land would then go to benefit for the debts to be paid off from the war. So what was going to be established is the surveying of these what were called townships at the time, and they were 36 square mile townships, with the 16th square always being reserved for education, which is huge. Okay. 2 years later, we look at the Northwest Ordinance, specifically, obviously, Northwest, and the carving out of these brand new 5 states that will soon be generated out in those areas, like, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. These are the rules for creating the states. For instance, you have to have 60,000 folks before you can actually apply for statehood. But more importantly, this is the first time we're actually going to see states take a stand, again, prohibit slavery, okay, and that's huge, okay? Now, one of the biggest weaknesses to really kind of expose itself was after the war, we're going to see a series of problems, spawn up with the collecting of debts. And every state's going to have its own debt because of the war. They borrowed money from the Articles of Confederation, they borrowed money for projects, etc. Big post-war debt, okay, and the federal government's coming to collect. So who's going to pay? Well, a lot of states began to resort to actually raising the taxes, in this case, property taxes, of their citizens. Well, up in the area of Massachusetts, you got a lot of folks that actually fought for the Revolutionary War. They've been gone fighting the war. A lot of their farms became stagnant. So when they come home to find that actually their property taxes have been raised, they don't have the crops to pay off for the profit to actually pay these. So a lot of farmers' farms were beginning to get foreclosed on and actually taken away, as you can kind of see in this artist depiction down here. So Mr. Daniel Shays is going to actually organize a group of men, kind of like what we saw down with Bacon's Rebellion, with the regulators to then go disrupt the court proceedings to actually get these farmers out of court, and at least the proceedings would be disrupted temporarily so they wouldn't have to, or they can at least go back to their homes temporarily. The problem that the Articles, what this exposes about the Articles, is the fact that there is no Continental Army after the war's over. The Articles of Confederation does not give the federal government the power to send troops in to support shutting this rebellion down. So the Massachusetts militia has to rely on itself. And yes, they did shut it down eventually, but the effects of this is it exposes a couple things. Did the revolution create sort of this mobocracy type of mentality? Did this expose a need for a stronger central government? Does it expose the need for a more unified Continental Army? Okay, and the answer would absolutely be yes to all three. Okay, so what is going to come out of this types of events is we're going to see the first meeting suggested by, and only 5 states came. Alexander Hamilton, you see this gentleman right here. Alexander Hamilton suggested that the states meet to talk about the inadequacies and the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. Only New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Virginia showed up. You've seen this pattern before in our class, okay? The discussion was about state trade, the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, and Alexander Hamilton states at this time, we need to ditch the Articles of Confederation and write a brand new one. Well, only 5 out of the 13 are there, and you can't even have a quorum with that. So he wasn't going to have any success doing that. They draft a report, send it to Congress, and ask for a larger meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at the same state house that they wrote and had the Continental Congress and actually the Declaration of Independence passed. And the need was for changes to the Articles and actually possibly drafting a brand new document. We're going to see that happen in May of 1777 because Congress did give the right for them to do that. The goal was to change the Articles, not scrap them. However, scrapping took full place and a brand new document was put into place. 55 delegates representing 12 states are going to show up. New Hampshire will not show up to Philadelphia primarily for their own banking interests. We're going to see that these guys are white males, mostly college educated, young, 40s, wealthy, majority are lawyers, and you might say, Mr. Draper, why are you talking about this? Well, did it have an impact in the writing of this particular document? One of the biggest conflicts that occurred at this meeting was who gets representation in Congress and who gets more than the other. We're going to see 2 states, Virginia and New Jersey, step up with their own plans. Virginia obviously representing large states and New Jersey small states. Large states are more in favor that they should get larger representations, and smaller states know they're small, so they would like equal representation. Okay, so we have the Virginia plan versus the New Jersey plan. Connecticut will step in what is known as the Great Compromise to this major issue and present what they believe to be the most equitable way to do this. This becomes our modern version of our 2-house bicameral legislature. We're going to give each state equal representation in the Senate, which obviously appeases the small states. And we're going to give each state representation based on population in the House of Representatives. And so basically you've killed 2 birds with 1 stone here. The other issue is, what do we do with slaves? And the compromise that was given over was the 3/5 compromise. So each slave, and obviously this is being promoted for Southerners, Southerners would like to count slaves as human beings for representation in Congress, but don't count them for taxes for your state because you get taxed more if you have more people in your state. The compromise is that we'll treat each slave as 3/5 of a human being. And so you get a little bit on both sides of that issue for the Southerners. September 17, 1787, it is approved, and then it needs to be sent out for ratification And all we need is 9 out of the 13 states to approve it in order for it to become an actual living document. So as we see, we're going to be back at the State House in Philadelphia. The gentleman will approve it there at the Constitutional Convention. It then needs to be sent out after their signatures and approvals are done. It needs to be sent out to the individual states for approval. James Madison, the great note-taker of this meeting, became known as the father of the Constitution because of all the great notes that he took during that May through September meeting. We're also going to see, if you get a chance to ever take them, this is a modern version of the House of Representatives, and you ever hear them say left wing, right wing, you can actually see where a lot of the seats are proportioned, right? And you actually see, according to the seats, the larger the population, obviously, the more seats you're going to get, like in reference to California and also Texas, etc. Okay? Also, we're going to take a look at on Monday, the famous historian Charles Beard actually took a look at the fact that maybe the Constitution is purely an economic document. If you take a look at it, 41 of the 55 attended the Continental Congress. You've got all of them had some kind of colonial experience. Over half of them were lawyers, the vast majority. 50% of them finished college, very well educated. Most of them came of some definite wealth and towns of wealth and investments. 40 out of 55 had savings accounts in banks. 25 out of the 55 were bankers and lenders. 19 out of 55 were slave owners. So your real kind of question is, okay, well, who's not represented? Okay, well, we know women, we know the lower classes, we know slaves, American Indians. Okay, so are they looking out for their own interests? That's a possible theory. Did they write this document to protect their own economic self-interest? And that's one of the things that we will explore when we get into class next Monday. Okay. So as we go through some of the most important basic principles in the Constitution: federalism, okay, split government. Our country is set up as a democratic republic. We elect those to represent us, and power is split between the national government and the state governments, okay? This is a government for the people, by popular vote, popular sovereignty. It's set up as a limited government. We don't want any tyrants here, okay? Separation of powers. Thank you, Montesquieu. Three branches, right? Executive, legislative, and judicial. System of checks and balances. They get to check on each other to make sure that no branch is doing something outside the power that they're allowed. Republicanism. We saw this from Thomas Paine, right? We also saw it from the idea of the ancient Romans, okay? The concept that representatives are chosen by the people of that nation to govern them, okay? It's not a direct democracy. And then also, thank you, John Locke, individual rights and the social contract, government needs to protect those, okay? So as we get into the ratification of this Constitution, we're going to see two different groups. These are factions, not political parties, but factions. Okay, two factions. You're going to get those that are in favor of ratifying the Constitution and those that are not. Those that are in favor are known as the Federalists, okay? And these are key players: George Washington, Madison, Alexander Hamilton. Who supports these guys? Well, anybody that's going to benefit from it. So the wealthy, the more educated, the better organized, the lenders, the bankers, etc. We see that New York's going to be a huge state for ratification. So you saw Madison, Hamilton, and Jay pump New York with 85 essays submitted in newspapers in showing in full support and reasons why we should ratify the Constitution. So to them, the Constitution will protect their investments, their land holdings, and have a better balance of power than this one-branch Articles of Confederation. Now, on the flip side, you got the anti-federalists, right? Those that oppose a strong central government and Constitution. Your key players: Sam Adams, Patrick Henry, Robert Yates. Now, these guys are going to be more of your states' rights guys. They like the Articles of Confederation. Backcountry farmers, poor class, those that are in debt, those that think that they give over to this Constitution, it's going to be giving over all their power, and it's going to be giving over to the aristocrats up there in New England area, etc. Okay, so they would just like to amend the Constitution, not scrap it. Okay, and they truly believe like their Bill of Rights, or I should say their individual freedoms, are in jeopardy. Okay, so we'll take a look at the two most famous Federalist Papers and also the Anti-Federalist Papers on Monday. Okay, so when we look at the ratification, we know it's completed in 1787. You only need 9 out of the 13 states to approve. In 1788, 1 year later, they would get that 9th state. We would see full adoption by all 13 in 1789. and we will see the government start to operate a few months after that. The Bill of Rights would be added, the first 10 amendments in 1791 to appease those Anti-Federalists, although the Federalists didn't think it was necessary. The Anti-Federalists felt that, yes, it did need to be, in fact, in writing, on paper, in order so that it would not be taken advantage of. Some of the past influences here we're talking about: Magna Carta, okay, English Bill of Rights, John Locke, okay, Montesquieu, those state constitutions. All 5 of these things helped develop this document that we know as the United States Constitution. Okay, so as you can see, New Hampshire was the 9th state to ratify, and Rhode Island, hanging in there at the end, was the last one to say yes. So, as we see, your 3 lecture pack questions, which we'll actually assign on Monday, and so you can take a look at those early if you want to. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. You guys have a great weekend, and we will take a look at this a little bit more in depth on Monday.